Hi everyone, hope you're doing great. And today is going to be a really important video. तो आज हम देखेंगे what is CSS box model. So when you want to give particular height and width to an HTML element, you should know what are the concepts of box model. So let's get right into it.
So these are the topics we are going to take a look today. So first we'll see what is box model, and then we see the difference between content, padding, border and margin, right? We'll also discuss some things about margin sharing, and then we'll see height calculation and border box property, right? So let's get into VS Code, and let me just complete the boilerplate code, right? So here I'll add a div tag, and let's give it a class of box1, box1, and here I'll have a div tag with class box2, right? So now I am having these two div tags. Let me just add some content. So content from box1, right? And similarly I'll add this content to box2, so that should be content from box2, right? So let me just add a style tag here inside head, right? So I'll add a universal selector, but ignore this for now, right? I'll be explaining why I did this, right? But focus on these two selectors, this box1 selector and this box2 selector, right? So I'll just add some let's just give it a background color of light green, right? And let me just add a border of 10 pixel solid light blue, right? Or light sky blue, right? So now we are having this box which is having some content, and the background color of that is light green, and a border of 10 pixel. Let's analyze this in our browser, right? So I have opened my Chrome browser here, and inside this I have right clicked and I've clicked inspect, and in inspect let's go to elements and go to computed. So here you can see some box type of thing has appeared, right? So this is actually the box model in CSS. So what is box model? Basically in CSS you can imagine every container or every tag as a box, right? And inside that box, first we have the content of that box. The innermost thing of a box is the content of the box itself, right? Then we have padding, which actually separates the content of the box from the border. And then we have the border of anything, right? The container border basically. And then we have margin, which separates this whole box, right, including the border, padding and content, from the content which is surrounding this box, right? So margin basically separates this box from other things on our website, okay? And okay, so let me just hover on this content, and you can see let me just select this box and I'll just hover on a content. So inside this content you can see my whole box is being highlighted. So actually not the whole box. Let me just change the light sky blue to red, right? So you can see if I hover on this, you can only the content of that box which is inside, which is actually written here, is being selected, right, is being highlighted. If I hover on padding, you can see nothing is actually highlighted as of now, right? If I hover on border, you can see the border with the red border is being highlighted. Again I'll show, you can see the red border is being highlighted when I hover on border. And similarly for margin, if I hover on this, nothing is actually being highlighted here. You can also analyze that here a 10 is written, which actually means that 10 pixels border. Similarly, like we have defined here, it is having 10 pixel border. So like this is box model, and you can imagine everything as a box which is first having content and then padding, then border and then margin. So let's give some padding to this. So let me just add some padding, right? Padding, let's say 10 pixel padding. So you can see the area of this box has or you can say the height of this box has increased a little bit, and the content is actually having some space between the content and border, right? They are now having some space between, and this is space of 10 pixels. You can see now if I hover on padding, so you can see some area is highlighted, right? Again I'll hover on padding, so you can see some areas being highlighted, right, which is actually out of the content, right? Okay, So we know where the content is, we know where the padding is, we know where the border is. Now let's discuss margin. So I'll again give it a margin of 10 pixel here. So you can see as soon as I give it a margin of 10 pixel, this box actually got separated away from the web page boundaries by 10 pixels. Let me just give it a border of 1 pixel solid black here, and you can see if I remove this margin property from here, the border of this content from box 2 is actually joined with the border of content from box 1. You can see here, so these two borders are actually joining each other. As soon as I give them some margin, let me just give margin to box 1. You can see now it is being separated from 10 pixels from this content from box 2. I'll just hover on this, and you can now analyze that it is being separated from the box 2, right? So this is actually margin, right? So this is the whole concept about box model, and this is how you can this is how you can determine that where is the margin happening. Margin always comes inside the border but outside the content, right? So you can now have an idea of you now have an idea to apply these properties on your web page: the margin property, padding property, and the border property. Like, these are really important things, and no matter what framework you are using, maybe React in future, this thing will, again, CSS will depend on this thing only, right? Margin, border, and these properties will depend on box model only, right? So now we have a concept of margin overlapping, right? So let me just copy paste these properties, and I'll just give it to box 2, right? Now you might imagine that since this first box is also having a margin of 10 pixels, right? So this box should be separated from 10 pixels from box 2. But again, now this box 2 is also having a margin of 10 pixels, right? So eventually the distance between both of these should be 20 pixels by adding up, right? So 10 pixels, which is the bottom margin of first box, and 10 pixels from bottom margin of the second box. But actually they are only having 10 pixel space, right? What is going wrong? Nothing is going wrong. It is the concept of margin only, that margin actually overlaps, right? Since we say that margin is not part of the whole element, margin can overlap, right? And what would be the distance between both of these two? Would it take the margin from the second box, or would it take the margin from the first box? It actually takes the maximum margin out of all these stuff. So let's say if the box 2 was having margin 20, so the distance between both of these should be 20, right? Not 30. It would be 20, because 10 is being overlapped here also, right? So this is about margin overlapping, right? So now we know the concept of margin overlapping and the whole box model. Now let's discuss the concept of how to calculate the height, and let's discuss box sizing property. So to calculate the height of a box, right, you just have to consider the border, padding, and the content height, right? So let me just give it a height property of, let's say, I'll just give it a height property box 1. Let's say height is equal to let's say 70 pixels, right? So now you can see this is you can see the dimensions here, that this is actually having a height of 70. Ignore the width is actually in this case dynamic right now, but just see that I have fixed the height to 70 pixels here, right? Then padding is having 10 pixels, and then border is having 10 pixels. Ignore the margin because of the margin overlapping concept, right? So let's just calculate the height. So it should be 10 plus 10, which is 20, and then plus 70, right? So this 70 is actually the height of inner box, so that should be 90, plus 10 the top padding, so 100, and plus 10 which is border, so 110 pixels. So this is the total height of this whole object, right? But I think that there is a problem here, right? And the problem is that we have defined the height to be 70 pixels, but after adding up the heights of padding and border also, the actual height is 110 pixels, right? So this creates a lot of confusion, and it can also lead to a lot of errors, right? So how to fix it? By fixing, I mean, how can I set the height of the whole box depending on this height property only? How can I include padding and border also, and including the content also, in this height only? So for this we have a property called box sizing. So box sizing, and we have a the default is content box. We have another property called border box, which actually inculcates both the heights from padding and border inside this height property only. So I'll just give it this, and you can see the total height of this whole object is now 70. Let's calculate. So border 10 pixels plus 10 pixels, which is padding, so 20, 30 means 50, 60 and 70, right? So this is now the actual height of this body. So content has been given the height according to this box sizing property only, right? So this is the property which is basically used to give the height, which is the height property, to the object, and to prevent errors, so that we don't have to calculate the height from padding and border separately, right? Again, I'm repeating that margin do not is not counted in the height of this object. Only the padding, border and the content height is calculated, right? So the best practice is to give it a margin, give the margin 0, right? If I remove these, right, if I remove these, and now everything is now should be having margin 0, right? I'll just remove this universal, and you can see there is still some margin being given. So this is the default behavior of HTML, that it does give some default margin to stuff on the web page. We'll just do margin 0, so that we don't have to fix this margin every now and then, and we'll give this box sizing border box to the universal you can say selector. And this is how we can depend on this height property only, and similarly for width property these things are also applicable. So we can only depend on height and width property while we are sizing a box. So this is the importance of using box sizing and margin 0 in the universal selector, right? So hopefully you were able to understand the box sizing property and the box model itself. If you are enjoying the videos, please like, and until next time, stay tuned and keep coding.